To this day, I still dread going up to the highlands or into the dense forests, for in my mind, those places hold many strange and mystical things. I will recount the series of events my family encountered until we found a way to resolve those eerie occurrences. It was 2003. I was in 6th grade when news came down from my mother's hometown. My uncle Heen had passed away. He died of liver cancer. I remember when he was alive, he drank so much alcohol. Perhaps that was the lingering consequence of his heavy drinking. I didn't see him often due to the long distance. Each year, I only got to visit my mother's hometown once or twice. Every time I went, I'd see him drinking a huge glass of liquor with every meal. Back then, I was still very well behaved. I'd tiptoe over, try a sip, find it too spicy, and burst into tears. I still don't understand why I cried so much when I was already quite old. Uncle Heen had to comfort me for ages. Now, if I drank, someone would probably be crying along with me. That year at home, it was also nearing my summer break. Hearing of Uncle Heen's death, my father, Uncle David, my father's elder brother, Grandma, my maternal grandmother, and I reluctantly made our way back to the countryside. At that time, it was just the 4 of us. Being so young, I didn't feel much sadness, only excitement about going back to the countryside and watching the scenery from the car. My hometown is in Thanthai, Futho. From my house to there, if I remember correctly, it was over 100 kilometers, requiring a 4-hour car ride and 2 legs. The first leg was from my house to Hanoi, and then the second leg was from Hanoi, catching a bus directly to Tu Vu, up to my hometown. I remember when I was little, my mother and I often mistakenly took the Sun Tay bus when going up to the countryside. From there, to reach my village, we had to cross the De River, meaning another ferry trip was needed to get to the right place. Upon arrival, my mother would always get scolded by the aunts and uncles because she'd lived there since childhood but still didn't know the way. Despite the long journey, I didn't feel sleepy at all. Meanwhile, my father and Uncle David were already snoring loudly. Only Grandma sat there, sobbing quietly, probably mourning Uncle Heen. He died so young. That year, he was only 42. We arrived just past 12:00 p.m. Uncle Heen's house now had only a few people sparsely tidying up. As soon as Grandma arrived, she cried and rushed to his coffin, prostrating herself over it. Everyone was afraid she would faint from exhaustion and grief, so they tried to pull her away. But she resisted fiercely, so the family eventually let her be. Uncle Heen had left too soon, leaving behind Aunt Lily and their 2 young children. Everyone pitied the mother and her 3 children. Aunt Lily quickly set out a meal for my father, Uncle David, and me to eat to stave off hunger. But I wasn't hungry, nor could I swallow the cold, ceremonial rice. So, I went to play behind the house. Uncle Heen's house was an ordinary tiled house with a gentle hill behind it. It wasn't very high and sloped beautifully. Back then, every family in my hometown grew cassava. Those who grew little just planted it around their yard, but those who grew a lot planted it all over the hill. Some families even got rich from cassava. I remember when I was little, I used to play hide-and-seek there with the other children, and we'd jokingly break the cassava rows, which always earned us a scolding from Uncle Heen. I hesitantly walked up, partly wanting to see what it looked like again, and partly to relieve myself. After sitting in the car for hours, my stomach was aching. I'd only gone a short distance when I saw a person wearing black pants, a white shirt, and a pith helmet, standing with their back to me. I thought to myself that it must be some old man also looking for a place to relieve himself, so I didn't pay much attention. But strangely, after I had finished, I looked up and saw the person still standing, facing a bush, doing who knows what. Finding it odd, I called out, "Hey, mister, what are you doing?" I called 2 or 3 times, but there was no response. Curious, I ran up to see what he was looking at so intently. But it was strange he was only about 4 or 5 meters from me, yet I walked and still seemed a considerable distance away. The slope was gentle, so after a short climb, I was already out of breath. Too tired, I decided to go back down. As I walked, I thought to myself that he was probably some drunken man who had fallen asleep after relieving himself. Nearing the bottom, I glanced up again. But this time, there was no one standing by the bush. At that moment, I just thought he had gone somewhere else, so I went inside the house without another thought. By evening, being in the countryside near hills and mountains, Uncle Heen's house was very quiet, partly because it was tucked far away from the main road. My father, Uncle David, and I decided to stay there overnight, worrying that Aunt Lily might be too scared to sleep alone. Actually, my cousin Alex was also there with his wife, Sophia, but their house was at the very end of the lane. Besides, his wife was pregnant, and he had to look after her, so he couldn't stay to look after Aunt Lily. My Aunt Grace kept trying to persuade me to sleep at her house, but I stayed with my father. In the countryside, by around 9:00 p.m., it was already very quiet, as villagers go to bed early. Being young, I was prioritized to sleep inside the house. My bed was set up next to the coffin. My father and Uncle David spread out mats to sleep in the yard. There was actually a bed in the inner room, but because Uncle Heen had lain there before he passed, only Aunt Lily and the two younger children slept there. At first, I wanted to crawl in there to sleep with them, to feel less eerie, because the coffin was in the outer room, but no one let me. Everyone said there was some kind of taboo, which I didn't understand. I slept with Grandma. She must have been tired as she had fallen asleep earlier. I, however, tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Perhaps it was unfamiliar surroundings, an unfamiliar bed, and perhaps I was also cold, shivering, despite it being summer. Maybe it was the coldness emanating from the deceased in the coffin. After a while, I drifted off to sleep. I don't remember how long I slept, but I suddenly felt a chill and woke up. At that moment, I remember I wasn't fully awake and was still drowsy. My bed faced directly towards the gate. My eyes, still bleary, looked out to see if it was morning, when suddenly, I saw a shadowy figure slowly stepping in from the gate. The moon was bright that night, so I saw it very clearly. As it came closer, I saw it was a woman, her head covered in a wide, drooping conical hat and a cloth basket, not quite a basket, but like the fabric bags elderly people used to carry to market, slung over her shoulder. She was leading a small child by the hand. At first, I thought it was morning because the moonlight outside was so bright, so I figured it was just a neighbor coming over to invite Aunt Lily to the market. But the woman entered without calling or asking anyone. She just glided in silently. She walked so lightly. I had the impression she was flying, not walking. When she reached the porch where my father and Uncle David were sleeping, oh my God, my heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. She walked past my father and uncle, and they didn't even notice, still snoring steadily. Then she approached the coffin and stood there motionless. Let me describe my position relative to the coffin for you to understand. The coffin was placed lengthwise, its foot facing the door. My bed, on the other hand, had its head pointing towards the body of the coffin, about half a meter away. The foot of the bed pointed towards the wall. I was lying right on the outside. The woman stood just over a meter from me. At that moment, I only wanted to crane my neck to wake someone up and ask what it was, but I was terrified that she would know I was still awake. I kept my eyes barely open to peek, and she was still standing there. I tried to see her face to know who she was, but I couldn't because the oil lamp was too dim. Plus, her hat covered almost her entire face, and the child with her was very strange. I seemed to notice it had no face, just a flat, blank expanse of white. After a long while, she turned and walked towards the door. But the strange thing was, when she came in, I saw her walk in from the gate. When she walked out, I tried to look out the gate but didn't see her anywhere. I was so scared. I lay still and eventually fell asleep without knowing when. The next morning, when I woke up, I saw everyone bustling about, preparing to bury the coffin that afternoon. I started to stir, feeling a bit tired from what happened last night. As I passed the coffin, I intentionally looked down at the spot where the woman had stood to see if anything was unusual. I saw a puddle of water, almost completely dry. Shaking, I immediately ran to the back of the house to wash my face. The early morning air in my hometown was so pleasant. Perhaps it was because it was close to the forest and mountains. If I could live here, my lungs would be as green as a banana leaf. While brushing my teeth, I heard Aunt Lily yelling from inside the house. Not understanding what was happening, I ran up to see. I saw her grumbling and scolding some mice for running around and knocking over a picture of Uncle Heen from the altar. At this, goosebumps covered my entire body. Thinking of last night's events, could that woman have knocked over Uncle Heen's altar picture? It was illogical. If so, I should have heard a sound and seen her move. But at that time, everything was silent. I tried to push all those thoughts out of my head, hoping it really was just mice, causing Uncle Heen's picture to fall. After all, there was no reason for that woman to mess with my uncle. I hurried back to the backyard to continue brushing my teeth. After breakfast, with nothing to do, I played with everything in the house. Seeing my father and Uncle David bustling about made me laugh. Perhaps the bond between brothers, when they see each other rarely in life, means they want to help each other depart peacefully. Sometimes, that's all people need in their relationships. Near noon, I saw some men pushing a buffalo cart, the kind used to transport coffins to the field. The graveyard was quite a distance from Uncle Heen's house. You had to go out to the main road and then walk upstream a bit more to get there. It was called a graveyard for formality, but it was actually just a burial ground. Graves were buried in all sorts of chaotic ways, without any order. When they were about to take Uncle Heen out to the field, Grandma and Aunt Lily cried even more bitterly. The younger children still laughed and played. Perhaps they were too young to know their father was about to lie in the earth forever. Right at noon, everyone began to move the coffin onto the buffalo cart. At first, only 4 energetic young men went in to lift it. After a struggle, they cried out that it was too heavy, they couldn't lift it. Uncle Heen was already small-framed, and from the time he fell ill until his death, he became even smaller because he couldn't eat anything. Could it be that these young men couldn't lift a man weighing just over 40 kilograms? My father and Uncle David stepped in to help, and indeed, it was incredibly heavy, impossible to lift, as if a boulder were inside. At this point, everyone thought that Uncle Heen didn't want to leave home, so Aunt Lily went to the altar, lit incense, and prayed. After she finished praying, everyone tried to lift it again, and it felt feather-light. It was true that Uncle Heen still listened to his wife, but as soon as they reached the main road, they couldn't push it anymore. It became heavy again, just like before. Uncle Heen still didn't want to leave his wife and children, he still wanted to stay home. Everyone had to stop again, and poor Aunt Lily suffered. When Uncle Heen was alive, she ran everywhere, borrowing money for his treatment. When he died, she still had to run around to send him off. Each time Aunt Lily prayed, the cart would move again. From there to the graveyard, many times Uncle Heen didn't want to go, but in the end, he still listened to his wife and allowed himself to be laid in the earth. Behind Uncle Heen's house, 2 dogs were chained, one named Lou and the other 2. Both were black dogs. That afternoon, because of the funeral, Aunt Lily had to chain them up, afraid they would run around and bite people. She said the 2 dogs were very fierce, biting any stranger they saw. Before I even finished eating, I would often throw leftover bones for them to eat. Back then, I was naive. I thought if I played with them and fed them, they would consider me a friend and wouldn't bite me. That evening, I kept hearing to growling. Thinking it wanted to relieve itself, Aunt Lily unchained it. As soon as it was unchained, the 2 dogs dashed out into the alley. A little later, my cousins and I were sitting on the porch talking. There were 2 pillars on the porch where my father had hung a hammock to lie down and cool off. To ambled in from the alley, but Lou was nowhere to be seen. To kept walking, then suddenly jumped onto the hammock to sit and sway. My uncle chased it down for a while, but it jumped back up again. Uncle David, annoyed, took the hammock down to put it away, and to growled, then scurried off. When it was time to sleep, my uncle called the 2 dogs back to chain them up, afraid they'd wander off and get caught. But he called, and they were nowhere to be found, so he gave up. He closed the gate and went to bed. Aunt Lily and my 2 younger cousins, I should actually call them older siblings, but they were so small I just called them younger siblings, for ease, slept on the bed where Uncle Heen had lain before he passed. As soon as Aunt Lily went in and turned on the light, she suddenly saw to lying on the bed, already there. At this moment, my 2 cousins were still sleeping like the dead. Hearing Aunt Lily's scream, Uncle David and my father ran in. They were both stunned for a moment by the dog's strange behavior, then quickly chased it off the bed, but it stubbornly refused to leave. The 2 children, disturbed by the noise, woke up crying loudly, making everyone anxious. After a while, my father grabbed a mulberry branch and started whipping the dog with it. It howled loudly and ran away, disappearing. Aunt Lily froze, then quickly went to light incense for Uncle Heen. Everyone's mind was a jumble of unspoken thoughts. It wasn't until late that night that I finally started to fall asleep. This time, I asked to sleep with my father and uncle. As I was drifting off, I suddenly heard a high-pitched cackling laughter echoing from the gate. A moment later, I heard dogs barking, then howling. After a while, everything fell silent, only the faint whimper of a dog, as if it had just been scolded and knew it was wrong. Not knowing what it was, I was so scared that I huddled close to my father and uncle. I tried to force myself to sleep, but the sound haunted me, making sleep impossible. Perhaps after some time, I was too tired and fell asleep without realizing it. The next morning, as soon as my uncle opened the gate, he was startled to see Tu and Lu lying dead right by the gate. Their bodies were covered in bite marks, and they lay about 3 adult paces apart, to lay right near the gate. Upon closer inspection, my uncle noticed some claw marks on the gate. He thought that Tu had tried to get inside but couldn't. People always say that dogs bite ghosts, but who bit Tu and Lu? Everyone quickly took the 2 dogs to the backyard to bury them, and no one said a word to each other. It was as if everyone wanted to avoid the topic of the dogs. The entire day, everyone was silent. No one spoke a single word. I wanted to tell them about last night and the night before, but I didn't dare, fearing they wouldn't believe me, saying I was too tired and imagining things. And it was very strange. During the day, everything was fine, but as night fell, I always felt a shiver of dread when I was at Uncle Heen's house. That night was another evening I had to stay there. After eating, and after everyone had chatted a bit, Uncle David began to tell stories from the old days. He said that this place had been known for many strange occurrences since long ago. That was when my grandfather John and Grandma still lived up here. Later, the whole family moved downstream to live because that was my grandfather John's hometown. Uncle David was only about 11 or 12 years old then. One day, Grandfather John went to visit a friend in the neighboring village. The 2 villages were separated only by a tiny bridge spanning the village canal. That day, he had also had some alcohol, not completely drunk, but certainly tipsy. Grandfather John was very brave and feared nothing, neither living ghosts nor dead ones. His friend saw he was a bit wobbly and offered to take him home, but Grandfather John refused. He said he had his own legs and could go home himself. His friend, knowing Grandfather John's pride, didn't insist. At the entrance of my village back then, there was a huge bamboo thicket. No one knew how long it had been there, because Grandfather John had seen it growing there since he was a child. People always whispered that there were ghosts there, so at night, that spot was deserted, with no one passing by. If anyone had to leave the village at night, they would surely find another path. As Grandfather John walked home, whistling, suddenly a litter of pink piglets emerged from the bamboo thicket in front of him. There were 5 of them, but no sow was in sight. The piglets looked beautiful. Grandfather John stealthily followed them, intending to catch them. He thought, "Whose pigs are these running loose? If I catch them and bring them home, they're mine." He kept chasing them, but he could never catch up. When he saw them disappear into the bamboo thicket at the village entrance, he began to crawl in and search. At home, my grandma saw it was late and Grandfather John still hadn't returned. Fearing he had encountered trouble, she sent Uncle David and Uncle Stephen to look for him. The whole family scrambled out to search. When they reached the bamboo thicket, they found a pair of sandals there. Grandma recognized them as Grandfather John's. She told Uncle David to shine a torch into the thicket. After shining the light, everyone was horrified to see Grandfather John lying nestled deep inside. Normally, this bamboo thicket was very dense and thick. Even a child would find it hard to crawl in, let alone an adult. Yet, Grandfather John was lying in there, sound asleep. Grandma told Uncle Stephen to run home and get a machete to cut the bamboo and pull Grandfather John out. Back home, Grandma kept crying. After a while, Grandfather John woke up. Everyone rushed to ask why he had crawled into the bamboo thicket late at night. He said, "I saw a beautiful litter of piglets, so I chased them to catch them. When they went into the thicket, I went in to find them, but I didn't see anything. As soon as I crawled out, I found myself sitting at home." Everyone was scared, and no one said anything to each other. But everyone knew that when they pulled Grandfather John out of the bamboo thicket, he still thought he was searching for the piglets, unaware that he had fainted. Grandma silently went to the ancestral altar, lit incense, and prayed. Grandfather John, it seemed, also knew what he had just encountered. He quietly went to the well to wash his face and then went to bed. But that was just the beginning, because later, my uncle and cousin would encounter another incident. A section of the Da River flowed through my hometown. Every year in January and February, it would recede by nearly half, revealing a beautiful golden sandbank. A few years after Grandfather John's encounter with the ghost, everyone in the family had forgotten about it. Back then, Uncle David and Uncle Stephen were very mischievous. At noon, Grandfather John and Grandma would make them sleep, but they always sneaked out to play. Oh, I forgot to tell you about my Grandfather John's family situation. He had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. I've just mentioned Uncle David and Uncle Stephen. The 2 girls were my mother and Aunt Grace. Aunt Grace later fell in love with my uncle, who was from this area, so she didn't follow Grandfather John downstream anymore. One evening, Uncle David and Uncle Stephen decided to go play on the sandbank. Some of Uncle Stephen's friends were also with them. My mother and Aunt Grace were afraid of Grandfather John and Grandma, so they didn't dare to go. When they arrived, everyone gathered firewood to make a fire because it was still cold that day. As they were laughing and chatting, Uncle Stephen said he was going to wash his hands. They were too dirty. Everyone sat for a while, then suddenly remembered that Uncle Stephen hadn't returned. Uncle David called out, "Stephen, what are you doing? You're taking so long." A moment later, a voice replied, "Come play, brother." Everyone sitting around was startled, because in this season it was pitch dark. What was there to play? Without a word, each person grabbed a piece of firewood and went to look for him. They went to the part of the riverbank where there was still water to search, because at first, Uncle Stephen said he was going to wash his hands, but they looked and couldn't find him. Looking further upstream, they saw a figure running after something. Immediately thinking it was Uncle Stephen, everyone ran to catch up. When they caught up, Uncle Stephen was still smiling, pointing, and saying, "There's a big festival up there, brother. People are parading something. Let's go play together." Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing, but saw nothing. At this point, Uncle Stephen kept insisting on going to play, so Uncle David slapped him hard, making his eyes water. Uncle Stephen mumbled a few words, then fainted. My uncle carried him home and recounted everything to the whole family. Grandfather John then took a stick and beat him within an inch of his life for being so naughty and going out to play. Grandma didn't say a word, just quietly went to light incense and pray again. Uncle David and Uncle Stephen went out less at night after that day. Perhaps because I was scared, after a few days at Uncle Heen's house, I kept nagging my father to go to Aunt Grace's house. Uncle David, however, stayed there out of concern for Aunt Lily. A week after that, I didn't experience anything strange. After staying for exactly 1 week, my father, Uncle David, Grandma, and I all headed back home. This time, Grandma wanted to stay with Aunt Grace, so my father and Uncle David indulged her. She was already frail, and with Uncle Heen's recent passing, everyone was afraid she couldn't handle too much travel. That day, on the way home, I was still wondering about the events of the night before Uncle Heen's burial and the strange behavior of the 2 dogs. More than 2 years later, around mid-2005, news came from my hometown that Sophia, Alex's wife, had given birth to a phantom child, Khan Dan Khanlan. Alex recounted over the phone that 3 weeks after Uncle Heen's burial, Sophia began to go into labor and gave birth to a very handsome baby boy. But for some reason, he didn't cry, and his eyes kept looking into the distance, as if seeing something very far away. Every evening, when everyone was asleep, the baby would open his eyes wide and lie there giggling. But the story didn't end there. Everyone just thought he was a little different from other children, so they didn't pay much attention, until suddenly, 6 months later, he passed away. Alex said he didn't understand why his child, who had been perfectly normal, suddenly left them. Grandaunt Catherine, my father's older cousin, sister of Aunt Lily's father-in-law, or sister to my grandfather John, came to visit. After hearing Alex recount everything, she went into the inner room, took out a small bottle of blue ink and made a mark on the sole of the baby's right foot. No one there knew what she was doing. She remained silent, then quietly left. Some time later, Sophia became pregnant again. This time, her belly was sharply pointed. Everyone thought she would give birth to a boy. Alex was visibly happy, but it seemed that the eerie events were about to begin again. That time, when Sophia went into labor, she cried out in pain loudly. Alex was flustered, not knowing what to do. The medical station was quite far away, and this labor was so sudden he hadn't had time to prepare. He told Aunt Lily to look after Sophia, then immediately ran to Grandaunt Catherine's house to ask for her help with the delivery. Before the commune medical station opened here, Grandaunt Catherine used to be a midwife for everyone in the area. People always said she had a lucky hand, so everyone wanted her help. But since the commune medical station was built and doctors started promoting various health education, fewer people gave birth at home, preferring to go to the station. Only very poor families still had to rely on Grandaunt Catherine's help. She came over and urged everyone to boil water and prepare clean towels, knives, and scissors for her. Everyone outside was anxious because they still hadn't heard the baby cry, only Sophia's cries, which made them restless. Alex was about to go in to see what was happening when he suddenly heard Grandaunt Catherine scream. Everyone rushed in to see her sitting on the ground while the baby was on the bed. Her mouth was still stammering, and her hand kept pointing at the baby. A moment later, she uttered a sentence that horrified everyone present. "Your family is haunted by a wandering spirit. That child is a phantom child, you must get rid of it." A fearful atmosphere enveloped the house. No one spoke, the baby also didn't cry, just lay still and looked up at the ceiling. Sophia, perhaps from exhaustion, had already drifted off to sleep. After a while, Grandaunt Catherine slowly spoke. "When I delivered him, I saw it was a boy, but he didn't cry at all. His eyes were wide open and staring, very frightening. Then she lifted his right foot and almost dropped him to the ground in fear. The sole of his foot had a blue birthmark, right where she had marked the first child before he died. Everyone transitioned from fear to astonishment. She continued, "Your child is a ghost. Before this, it kept moving in and out of your wife's body. In truth, your wife hasn't given birth to any child. This time, it entered to die a second time." The whole family was frozen rigid. No one said anything, just stared at each other in terror. At this moment, if the baby had suddenly started giggling, I guarantee everyone would have run away. Grandaunt Catherine ambled away. As she left, she kept muttering, "Our family is haunted by it. We must pay for our past karma." After she left, the atmosphere in the house grew even heavier. Alex placed the baby in the crib, covered his wife with a thin blanket, and quietly went outside to smoke. Aunt Lily also quietly went upstairs. The next morning, Alex called us to tell us everything. Hearing my mother recount it, I shuddered. A few days later, I asked for time off to go to the countryside with my mother. My mother didn't want me to go, but I didn't listen. I enthusiastically followed, partly out of curiosity, partly wanting to play. Upon arrival, Uncle Heen's house looked very different from before. The pond next to the house seemed to have been widened, and they only kept grass carp there. When I went to look, seeing the big, sluggish fish wriggling, I was delighted, wishing I had a fishing rod to catch some. Going down to Alex's house, I only saw Sophia at home, looking after their newborn. My mother and I went to see, and he was still awake, but his eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. My mother called him, but he didn't react. Sophia tearfully said he didn't know anything, he only cried when he was hungry. Indeed, looking into his eyes then sent shivers down my spine. I only dared to sit behind my mother, listening to the two women talk. By noon, Uncle Heen and Alex also returned. Alex looked thinner and thinner, probably from too much worry. That afternoon, during lunch, my mother and Aunt Lily discussed driving up to Hoa Bin the next morning to consult a master. My hometown borders Hoa Bin, you see. Driving a motorbike up there only takes about 60 kilometers. It takes a little over an hour to get there. My uncle said there was a very powerful master there, so we should go and see what was happening to our family. That evening, engrossed in play, I took my bath late. The bathroom was quite a distance from Uncle Heen's house, located beside the pond. As I was showering inside, I kept hearing someone calling ducks outside. Thinking I had misheard, I didn't pay attention and continued bathing. But the sound grew closer and began to sound familiar, so I quickly rinsed off and ran out to see what it was. As soon as I stepped out, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Sophia was fumbling around the pond doing something. I heard her continuously making sounds like she was herding ducks. The problem was, I didn't see any ducks, yet she kept calling. I called loudly, "Sophia, what are you doing?" There was no reply. I ran closer and nearly tripped and fell. She looked terrifying at that moment. She seemed like a lost soul, crouched in the middle of the pond, doing something. I was so scared that I yelled out loudly. A moment later, my uncle, mother, and Alex ran out. Alex ran straight into the pond to carry his wife up, but she struggled and tried to bite him. At this, my mother immediately ran to a nearby mulberry tree. When she returned, she held a mulberry branch, though I didn't know what for. My mother told me to go into the house and get a rope to tie Sophia up. My hands and feet were trembling so much I couldn't move. My uncle quickly went in and brought out the rope. After tying Sophia up, my mother told Alex to urinate on her immediately. He was reluctant, out of concern for his wife and embarrassment, so he didn't dare. A moment later, my mother sharply rebuked him, and he finally gathered the courage, though it took him a while to manage. When Alex urinated, Sophia looked terrifying, her eyes wide and bloodshot. I looked at her and felt as if her eyes were red. After he finished, my mother held the mulberry branch and whipped her, scolding, "Get out of here, you wretched thing, get out!" My mother kept whipping and scolding. Sophia kept thrashing as if in immense pain. Her mouth kept hissing out some words, but she couldn't make a sound. After a while, Sophia suddenly sat still, let out a few high-pitched giggles, then fainted completely. My mother told Alex to carry her into the house and perform a wind-scraping ritual cow G. A while later, Sophia regained consciousness. Everyone asked why she had wandered to the pond in the middle of the night. She said she was going to the bathroom when she suddenly heard a flock of ducks quacking past. She thought the house ducks had escaped their coop, so she chased them. When she reached the pond, she saw them swimming to the middle, so she went out to herd them back. After that, she didn't remember anything. At that point, my mother said, "The house is definitely haunted by a spirit. We absolutely must go see the master tomorrow. It was trying to blind us and kill our family." I also described how the pond next to Uncle Heen's house was quite deep. I heard my brother say that he is over 1.7 meters tall, and if he waded to the middle of the pond, the water would be over his head. Before going to sleep, my mother told Alex to sprinkle urine around the doorways before going to bed. Lying in bed, I thought to myself how lucky I was that the ghost hadn't possessed me. Otherwise, everyone might be scrambling to find me, unaware that I had drowned in the pond. That's why every house in the countryside grows a mulberry tree, perhaps to ward off ghosts, my friends. It seemed no one could sleep that night. My mother tossed and turned endlessly, and from the next room I could hear Uncle Heen's sigh. I glanced at the clock to check the time and accidentally bumped Uncle Heen's photo on the altar. The photo showed him smiling brightly, but for some reason, when I looked at it, I felt as if he was glancing at me with a mysterious smile. I quickly looked back at the clock and saw it was almost 2 a.m. I hurriedly burrowed behind my mother and hid my face, trying to sleep. After a while, suddenly there was a knocking sound at the gate. Since Lewin died, Uncle Heen's family hadn't dared to keep dogs, so the silence was even more unnerving. The knocking at the gate was urgent. I nudged my mother, and she told me to lie still and go to sleep, but I was too scared to sleep. A moment later, I started hearing loud calls accompanied by banging on the gate. "Aunt Lily, open the door for me quickly." Lily was Aunt Lily's name. The voice sounded very much like Grandaunt Catherine's, but out of fear, no one dared to go see who was calling. As if knowing everyone inside was scared of ghosts, the person outside called even louder. "Come open the door, dear sister, it's not a ghost." As soon as those words finished, I saw Aunt Lily emerge from her room, holding a flashlight, her face anxious, looking at my mother and saying, "I think I heard Grandaunt Catherine calling." My mother and I nodded in agreement, but still no one wanted to go out. Taking a chance, my mother reached under the head of the bed and pulled out the mulberry branch. It turned out she had hidden it there since evening. I excitedly grabbed another flashlight and followed my mother and aunt to the gate. My aunt and I shone our flashlights briefly and saw a woman standing at the gate. I was startled and almost went back inside, but I forced myself to stay and see who it was. My mother went to open the gate, and it was indeed Grandaunt Catherine. She looked very tired, her eyes deeply sunken as if from lack of sleep. After she entered the house, my mother asked, "Grandaunt, what brings you here so late?" I glanced at the clock. It was 2:30 a.m. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. She drank a whole cup of water in one gulp, then sat down and slowly began to speak. "Aunt Lily, your father-in-law just came home." Aunt Lily, startled, asked, "My father-in-law, why did he come back? Why didn't he go to his own house but came to yours?" Grandaunt Catherine continued, "He wanted to go home so badly, but he couldn't. Your house has a ghost guarding the gate." Everyone was startled, not understanding what was happening. Her eyes then became pensive, as if looking into a distant place. She sighed deeply and began to tell everyone the reason for everything. It happened almost half a century ago. My great-grandfather Daniel had 5 children in total, but one son died as a baby due to premature birth. The second child was Aunt Lily's father-in-law, and the 3 children after that were all girls. My grandma and Grandaunt Catherine were biological sisters. There was also another sister, but she lived with her husband in Hanoi and was not relevant to the story I'm telling, so I won't mention her. When Grandfather John, Aunt Lily's father-in-law's brother, the second son of great-grandfather Daniel who met the pigs, was exactly 26, he asked great-grandfather Daniel for permission to go downstream to work with a friend, as there was nothing for him to do idling at home. That year, he followed his friend to Taibin to work as a laborer in a red brick factory owned by an acquaintance. At first, he was diligent, quick, and enthusiastic, so the owner was very fond of him. But unfortunately, as time went on, he fell in with bad friends and got involved in drinking and gambling, burning through all the money he earned in all-night gambling sessions. At that time, he met a female worker also employed there, named Haley. She was known for her beauty and gentle nature, so everyone at the factory liked her. Many male workers flirted with her constantly, but she hadn't accepted anyone. For some reason, she took a liking to Grandfather John. The other men wrote love letters and poems of all kinds, but she felt nothing for them. Grandfather John, at that time, didn't pay any attention to her either, considering her only as a friend or younger sister, because the elders at home had already arranged a match for him. In the old days in the countryside, there was still the belief that children must obey their parents' arranged marriages, whether son or daughter. If parents said who to marry, they just followed without question. Time passed, and it seemed that proximity eventually ignited a spark. Grandfather John also began to reciprocate Haley's love, making all sorts of promises, and they moved in together. Then, one day, he and Haley did what a husband and wife would do. At that moment, he didn't yet know how the words he spoke that night would harm him and his descendants. They lived together as husband and wife for a while, but he still couldn't give up his habits of drinking and gambling. Haley advised him over and over, but he would just nod vaguely and then resume his old ways the next day. Every night, he would return late, always in a drunken state. His wages weren't enough for him to spend. Sometimes, he even forced Haley to give him money to gamble. Seeing his friend not settling down to work, Grandfather John's friend, who had come with him, wrote a letter detailing everything and sent it home. After receiving the news, great-grandfather Daniel was furious. He personally went down to where Grandfather John worked, ordered him to return and stop working there. Grandfather John was caught by surprise and didn't know how to react when Haley ran out and knelt, begging for him. As if realizing this was his son's mistress, great-grandfather Daniel grew even more enraged, kicked Haley, sending her sprawling backward, then jumped in and slapped Grandfather John. Both of them could do nothing but kneel, crying and begging for great-grandfather Daniel's forgiveness. Far from forgiving them, he ordered Grandfather John to return to the village that very day to prepare for his wedding. Grandfather John feared his father and dared not disobey. Only Haley, taking a risk, stood up and begged to marry Grandfather John, for she was already carrying his child. At this, both great-grandfather Daniel and Grandfather John were stunned. Grandfather John had no idea Haley was pregnant, but he was a coward, afraid of his father's scolding, so he vehemently denied the pregnancy was his. Hearing Grandfather John's words, Haley froze. She never imagined those words would come from his mouth, nor did she ever think she would love someone so cowardly and deceitful. She cried and ran away. About a month after returning to the village, Grandfather John married his arranged bride, who would later become Aunt Lily's mother-in-law. Months and years passed, and everyone forgot about the old story, but one strange thing was that after Grandfather John and his wife married, every time she got pregnant, she would miscarry. It wasn't until much later that she finally gave birth to Uncle Heen, but he was also born prematurely and difficult to raise, which is why Uncle Heen remained small-framed since childhood. At that time, everyone was happy and relieved that great-grandfather Daniel's lineage finally had a male heir. As for Haley, no one heard anything about her later. But Grandfather John's friend, who had accompanied him back then, said he heard that the night Grandfather John returned to the village with great-grandfather Daniel, Haley also left and was never heard from again. As Grandaunt Catherine finished her story, suddenly there were thudding sounds as if someone was throwing stones onto the roof. I was about to curse whoever was foolish enough to throw stones, risking breaking the tiles, but then I remembered it was almost 3:00 a.m., who would be so idle as to stand outside throwing stones? The sounds came every 5 minutes or so. Grandaunt Catherine gestured for everyone to be quiet, then whispered, "It's her. She's here." "Who is she?" Everyone murmured, not knowing what was happening. My grandmother whispered, "She's back. Haley is back." The murmuring seemed to die down completely. Everyone sat still. The images from Grandaunt Catherine's story flashed vividly in everyone's minds like a film. Grandfather John, Haley, and everything that had happened. The stone throwing stopped, but suddenly there was a piercing cry from behind the house, followed by maniacal giggling. Everyone's faces turned pale, and they looked at each other in silence. My uncle went to the altar to light incense for the ancestors and Uncle Heen. As soon as he stuck the incense into the bowl, the flames suddenly flared up. Grandfather John's photo toppled over onto the table. Rushing back to where everyone was standing, my uncle, breathless, pointed. Perhaps his mouth was stiff with fear, unable to utter a single word. But there was no need to speak. Everyone present had witnessed it all, the clear lines of terror etched on each face. Even my mother, usually considered the most fearless and courageous, didn't know what to say. Her body trembled uncontrollably. I was no less affected. If I were a little younger, I might have cried and wet myself then and there. "Ah, ah, ah!" Alex's scream from downstairs drew everyone's attention. Rushing to see, the first thing that hit my eyes was an utterly bizarre sight. Alex's house was at the end of the pond, directly opposite Aunt Lily's house. At this moment, I saw Sophia, her hair disheveled, slowly walking up towards where everyone was standing. For some reason, despite the darkness, I felt her face was very bright. She smiled a very eerie, twisted smile, holding something wrapped in her hand. No, not wrapped. Looking closely, I thought it was a baby, and hearing giggling sounds coming from it, I guessed it was. She just kept walking, slowly advancing towards Aunt Lily's house. After a moment of regaining their senses, Grandaunt Catherine told everyone to go inside and quickly close the door. As the door slowly closed, I vaguely saw Sophia dart forward, moving very quickly, as if trying to rush into the house before the door was fully shut. The moment I saw her like that, it haunted me to this day, my friends. 5 minutes, 10 minutes passed, and everything was eerily quiet. There was no movement outside. Suddenly, there were knocking and scratching sounds at the front door. I was sitting on a nearby chair and felt as if someone was trying to open the door. Sweat poured off me as if I'd just bathed. I didn't even know what I was afraid of anymore. It was like the fear of some monster that would kick down the door and devour everyone. Then everything fell silent again. Everyone looked at each other tensely. Suddenly, with a loud bang, the door seemed to be kicked hard from outside. The latch rattled precariously, as if the door could burst open at any moment. My mother waved me over and gave me a bowl, telling me to urinate into it. Oh, now I had no mind for peeing or anything else. I frowned, shaking my head vigorously. The second kick on the door echoed, and the flimsy wooden door seemed unable to withstand it any longer. My mother grabbed me, urging me to pee into the bowl quickly. Closing my eyes, I aimed directly into the bowl and urinated. This time, silence again. Everyone tried to hold their breath, waiting for any movement, but there was nothing. 30 minutes passed, and Grandaunt Catherine began to stand up and walk towards the door. Everyone slowly followed. As the door opened, no one saw anyone outside. They looked around, but there was nothing. Just as they were about to go downstairs to check on Alex, Sophia slowly walked up from the direction of the bathroom. My Grandaunt Catherine shouted, "Is that you, Sophia? What are you doing wandering out there in the middle of the night, child?" There was no reply. She just walked straight towards everyone. When she was about 3 meters away, my mother, from behind, threw the bowl of my urine directly at her. Suddenly, Sophia shrieked, and the baby she was holding also screamed. My mother immediately ran to Sophia, still holding the mulberry branch she had kept since the evening. But this time, it seemed to have been dipped in my urine. I saw water dripping down. My mother closed her eyes and whipped her. Each time my mother brought the mulberry branch down, Sophia shrieked terrifyingly. This time, I noticed my mother kept hitting her ankles. After a while, Sophia collapsed, unconscious. The baby, however, seemed to be asleep. It had been asleep for who knows how long. It was fortunate that when Sophia fell, the baby didn't hit its head on the ground. Even though it was a ghost, everyone still considered it their grandchild, and no one wanted to see their grandchild hurt. They quickly carried Sophia to the bed for Aunt Lily to perform the wind-scraping ritual. My mother and Grandaunt Catherine, meanwhile, ran downstairs to check on Alex. As soon as they got there, they saw Alex lying prostrate in front of the door, his mouth agape. He must have fainted from fear. My mother slapped him a few times, and he woke up, his face pale, looking nervously around before asking, "Her? No, where's my wife, Aunt?" My mother recounted everything that had just happened. Alex's face drained of all color and he said, panting, "You told me to sprinkle urine at the door, but I forgot. I was asleep then, and suddenly I heard some noises, so I woke up. When I got up, I saw my wife holding the baby and opening the door to go outside. I called, but she didn't answer, so I ran out to see what was wrong with her. But as soon as I got out there, I saw my wife's face. No, it was her," he stammered, unable to form words. My mother quickly handed him a glass of water, and he continued, "I saw my wife's face, but it was some other woman's face, grinning slyly. I was so scared that I fainted." Again, no one said a word to each other. Everyone was silent. Closer to dawn, my grandma said to my mother, "It's a good thing you're a tiger-year baby, otherwise our family would have faced disaster yesterday." And it was true, my friends. My mother was born in 1962, the year of the water tiger. She had never been afraid of ghosts. She said she only feared black-haired ghosts, living people. It seems because I'm her child. My urine also frightens ghosts more than ordinary urine, my friends. The next morning, due to a sleepless night, everyone was exhausted. We planned to leave for Hoa Bin at 8 a.m. to find the master to resolve the situation. But Sophia was still in a coma, so no one dared to leave. At first, my mother told me to stay home and watch her, but I was terrified. I was afraid that if she woke up and saw me, she would jump at my throat, so I insisted on going with my mother no matter what. After a debate, it seemed no one could be left at home. Fortunately, Grandaunt Catherine said everyone should go, and she would stay and watch the house, which eased my mother's worries a bit. This trip involved 4 people, my mother, Aunt Lily, Alex, and myself. After breakfast, promptly at 8 a.m., everyone set off. But as they were about to leave, the car Aunt Lily was sitting in, just after starting, sputtered and died. No matter how many times they tried, it wouldn't start. Alex ran over to check the car, but he found nothing wrong. It seemed perfectly normal. Grandaunt Catherine told Alex to try his car, and strangely enough, his car also wouldn't start. Knowing something was wrong, and at a loss, Grandaunt Catherine told my mother to get into the car and try starting it. My mother sat in the car, tried once, and it started immediately. Grandaunt Catherine waved, telling my mother to drive out to the main road and leave the car there, then come back for Alex's car. After some struggle, everyone was finally settled and began their journey to find the master. The road up there was indeed not as short as I initially thought. Houses were sparse, and all I could see were mountains. I was sitting in the back, drowsy, nodding off. I didn't know how long we had been traveling. All I knew was that my body ached. We kept stopping to ask for directions, which took quite a lot of time. The master we were going to see was named Leo. I don't know if he still practices fortune-telling and exorcism today, but back then, quite a few people knew his name. As I was in a daze, the car pulled up in front of a 2-story house. Thinking we had arrived at the master's house, I jumped out of the car. I must admit, I was very excited on the way, but upon arrival, I felt a shiver of dread. Goosebumps covered my entire body. I kept thinking that inside the houses of these spiritual masters, there were many ghosts. And right before, someone had told me that sorcerers often keep yin soldiers, ghostly armies, at home, so I felt nervous. My mother stood at the gate and called into the house, "Master Leo, are you home?" After waiting a moment, an old man of about 70 stepped out, his face wrinkled, and with a toothless grin, he asked who it was, then invited everyone inside. Honestly, I didn't want to go in at all. At first, I even thought of telling my mother to leave the car there and I'd wait and watch it, but I reconsidered. I hesitated at the gate, making my mother glare at me. Afraid she'd scold me, I reluctantly stepped inside. Upon entering the house, the first thing I noticed was that the master's house was not as gloomy as I had imagined. In the yard, there were many potted plants, and a tiled house downstairs, which I guessed was a storage room or kitchen because it looked a bit old. He seemed to be living alone, as I hadn't heard anyone else's voice the entire time. Stepping inside the house, my eyes immediately fell upon an altar brightly lit with red lamps. Counting them, I saw a total of 11 incense bowls, some large, some small, divided into 3 tables. The topmost one worshipped Buddha, while the ones below worshipped some other gods I didn't recognize, but the feeling was very peaceful, not eerie at all. It was different from the gods I usually saw people worshipping. He poured water for us and with his toothless grin asked, "You've come here today to ask me to catch a ghost, haven't you?" He looked very kind, which immediately made me feel at ease. Surprised by his question, my whole family nodded vigorously. My mother added, "Yes, master, it seems our house is haunted by a wandering spirit. We hope you can help us understand and appease it." He smiled again and began to speak. "I knew it from the start. I saw a woman and a child following you. It's a malevolent spirit. It's probably standing at the gate now because no ghost dares to enter my house." Everyone was speechless. It turned out it had been following my family from home. Who knows whose car it had been riding in just now? My mother eagerly said to the master, "Since you already know everything, I beg you to come home with us to resolve this for our family. Everyone in the house hasn't slept for days. I owe you so much, master." He continued, "Now, you all go home first, take this, and stick it at the doorway and the four corners of the house. Go home and prepare the offerings first. I have to go help another family now. They asked me yesterday, and they'll be coming to pick me up soon." With that, he pressed a stack of yellow talismans into my mother's hand, on which strange symbols were drawn. My mother was uneasy, constantly urging him to come and help, but he politely refused, so we had no choice. Before we left, he also gave my mother a small statue of Bodhisattva, instructing her to use it if the 5 talismans didn't work that night. Everyone said goodbye to him and got into the car to go home. I felt fond of him, so I bid him farewell very politely, unlike when I first saw him, thinking he was a devil. Seeing that the sun was almost at its zenith, everyone decided to detour to Aunt Lily's sister's house nearby. Partly because they were hungry, and partly because everyone was tired after such a long journey, they wanted to find a place to rest and would go home in the afternoon. This aunt was Aunt Lily's older sister, also over 50 this year, looking very stout but with a somewhat fierce face. After eating, sleeping, and resting, I checked the clock and it was already past 3:00 p.m. Everyone was anxious to go home immediately, but Aunt Lily's sister insisted they stay for dinner. Everyone politely declined, but to no avail. Well, out of respect, everyone stayed to finish dinner before leaving. At 6:45 p.m., everyone began to head back. I didn't feel any warmth towards this aunt, so I didn't greet her. I just got into the car and went straight home. It was May, but it was already starting to get dark. I was sleepy and saw a motorbike ahead, seemingly going in the same direction as us, so my mother kept following it to feel safer, as the road was very deserted. After a while, I noticed something strange. A few minutes ago, I looked to the side of the road and saw a milestone indicating 60 kilometers to my hometown. But now, after continuing to drive, it still showed 60 kilometers. Startled, thinking I was hallucinating, I called my mother. My mother slowed down to check, and I nearly screamed aloud, seeing the milestone showing the exact same reading. Looking ahead, the motorbike was still cruising along slowly. I couldn't see the person on the bike very clearly. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, only seeing a vague black mass. My mother had been watching it the whole time, so she hadn't paid attention to the road. I waved to Alex to stop the car, then my mother said, "No more driving, we've been blinded. Stop now, or we'll run out of gas." Tension was etched on everyone's faces. It turned out we had been led in circles by the motorbike ahead without realizing it. Looking up, the other motorbike had disappeared some time ago. Knowing clearly that we had been tampered with by something, no one spoke. Alex angrily shouted, "Aunt, let me and Aunt Lily go ahead and scout the way. Sitting here, when will we ever get home?" My mother sighed and said that even if we went, we wouldn't find the way. It would just keep leading us in circles. We needed to save gas to get home, and it was so strange, my friends. The road was very straight, not winding at all, yet every time my family drove, they would return to the starting point. It was completely dark now, and everyone was worried. They all sat in silence for a while, then suddenly remembered the Bodhisattva statue Master Leo had given them. My mother pulled it out, chanted, "Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Adai Da Fat," and then we continued driving. I don't know if it had any effect or not, but my mother just held it and kept chanting. A while later, the car started to go onto a different road. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and sped up to quickly get home. I even tried to look back to see if I could spot anyone, but there was nothing. What a relief. On the way home, Aunt Lily kept urging Alex to drive faster, as she suddenly felt a burning heat. My mother and I just smiled, thinking she was scared. When we got home, it was already past 8:30 p.m. Sophia had also woken up and was sitting with Grandma upstairs. Hearing the sound of our car, Grandma and Sophia rushed out, asking all sorts of questions. They were probably worried because we were so late. My mother recounted everything. how the master had said this, how we met relatives, and finally how we were blinded by a ghost that wouldn't let us go home. Hearing the end, I saw Grandma and Sophia sit silently, not saying anything more, but finally breathing a sigh of relief that the trip had been safe. No one was hurt. Everyone at home had been restless since noon. My mother went inside, looked around for a bit, then told Alex to stick all the talismans as instructed by Master Leo. As for the Avalokiteshvara statue, my mother gave it to Sophia to hold, because she was the most timid person in the house, fearing she might be possessed by a ghost again like in the previous days. Tonight, everyone went upstairs to sleep, and it was understandable. Alex and Sophia's house downstairs, even if given money, they wouldn't dare to sleep there tonight. Grandma had already sent Jade and Luna, Uncle Heen's 2 daughters, to Aunt Grace's house that morning. It was best to keep them away from home for a day or two until this matter was resolved, lest something unfortunate happen, causing lifelong regret. Aunt Grace and her husband knew about the situation and wanted to help, but Grandma stopped them, saying they would only get in the way. What help could they offer? We would wait until the master arrived and then decide. My mother told everyone that the problem now was the baby still sleeping downstairs. Should they bring him upstairs or not? I grimaced, afraid that if they brought him up, he would giggle creepily at night, and I'd surely wet my pants. Sophia, out of pity for the baby, insisted he be brought upstairs to stay with everyone. Feeling sorry for Sophia, everyone decided to bring him up, but it was strange. Every time they picked him up and were about to carry him into the house, he would cry, and no matter how they tried to soothe him, it wouldn't work. They tried several times, but it was no use. They guessed it was because of the talismans on the house, making him afraid to enter. So, they decided to leave him downstairs and lock the door, because if they removed the talismans now, they feared something would happen tonight. I also breathed a sigh of relief, feeling less uneasy. While sitting and listening to my mother tell stories, I suddenly got a terrible stomach ache. I didn't know what I had eaten that afternoon to make my stomach protest so fiercely now. The thought of going to the toilet alone at this time made me feel like I would die. But if I used a chamber pot or asked someone to accompany me, I would be embarrassed, as I was already grown up and a man, so I decided to go alone. It wasn't too late yet, so I wasn't too scared. Uncle Heen's toilet was set back further than the bathroom, facing directly towards a banana grove in the upper garden. Back then, the toilet was just a few temporary wooden planks put together for modesty. The waste fell directly into the pond for the fish to eat. That's called the vac, Vietnamese for garden pond cage farming model, my friends. After a while, I felt much lighter, but I thought I heard rustling sounds outside. I squinted through the tarp covering and saw a shadowy figure, who knows who, heading straight up the cassava hill. I found it very strange. Who would be climbing up there at this hour, not afraid of ghosts? As I was thinking, thud, something was thrown against the right side of the toilet. My body jolted. It wasn't that I was afraid of whatever had been thrown to tease me, but that I didn't hear the thrown object fall into the pond. My mind started imagining all sorts of things. I quickly finished up and ran back into the house, not daring to look back. My face pale, I went to sit with my mother and huddled in between them. After a while, I yawned widely. My mother told me to go to bed first. She would sleep later. I was very sleepy, so I jumped onto the bed. But every time I lay down for a bit, I felt a chill on the back of my neck, as if someone was staring intently at me from behind. I quickly turned around, but saw nothing. Looking at the window that faced directly outside, the garden looked so gloomy. I thought of reaching out to close it, but if I did, the air in the house would become stuffy because it was summer, so I gave up. I just decided to let whatever happen, and sleep first. As I was sleeping soundly, I suddenly felt someone pinching my arm and shaking it, urging me to wake up. Opening my eyes, it was my mother. Not understanding what was happening that she would wake me up at this hour, I grumbled and snapped. She gestured for silence and told me to sit with everyone else. It was past 10 p.m. and everyone was still awake. Their faces looked tense and they kept looking towards the door. I didn't know anything. My mother told me to sit still, so I did. After a while, I thought I also heard something. It sounded like wooden clogs tapping on the courtyard, as if someone was walking back and forth outside. The footsteps were very slow, stopping abruptly when they reached the front door, then moving away again. Houses in the countryside often have a raised step compared to the yard, and each time the footsteps reached there, they would turn in a different direction. I kept imagining something very terrifying outside. It kept walking back and forth, but couldn't enter our house. Suddenly, the baby downstairs cried out. Sophia, feeling pity for her child and thinking something was wrong, tried to rush down to check, but luckily Alex held her back in time. Grandaunt Catherine sternly told her to sit still, and she dared not stand up again. The baby kept crying. I didn't know what anyone had done to make it cry so terribly. Grandma held her prayer beads, mumbling Buddhist chants. Poof, the yellow light bulb in the house suddenly went out. Oh no, why did the power go out at this hour? Everyone started murmuring, fumbling around for a while until Alex found a lighter and lit the oil lamp on the altar. Everyone looked at each other tensely. The baby stopped crying, and everything fell eerily silent again, when suddenly there was a very faint call from outside the front door. Mom, open the door for me. That was Jade's voice, Aunt Lily's eldest daughter. She was at Aunt Grace's house, wasn't she? How could she have run back here? This time, it was Aunt Lily's turn to be anxious. She didn't know if it was her child or not, but the voice sounded as if Jade was speaking with her face submerged in a basin of water, mumbling. Grandaunt Catherine told Aunt Lily to ignore it. No matter what it calls, don't answer. At this point, I also remembered that the gate was locked, so how could anyone outside get in? Surely, the person calling outside was someone else, not Jade. The calls grew urgent, as if compelling the people inside to open the door immediately. Grandma's chanting grew louder and louder, as if to suppress everyone's fear. After a while, everything fell silent again. No more calls, no more crying baby. The oil lamp glowed faintly, flickering at times as if about to go out, which only intensified the eerie atmosphere in the house. After sitting for a while, I suddenly felt a chill, so I nudged my mother and asked. My mother also said she suddenly had goosebumps all over, and it wasn't just my mother and I, but everyone in the house felt it. It was summer, so feeling cold out of nowhere was illogical. I looked around the house for a moment and saw that the window next to where I had just been lying was wide open. So that's where the wind was coming from. I immediately ran to close the window, but oh my God, my heart nearly dropped out. Right outside the window, the woman with the cloth basket, whom I had seen 2 years ago, was standing there silently. She was wearing her conical hat, completely covering her face. I was about to scream, but before I could, the oil lamp on the table suddenly went out. My head was spinning. I swear, if that woman had reached in and touched my face, I would have had a heart attack and died right then and there. Even without the light, I saw her very clearly. She didn't look like a ghost at all. She looked very real, not illusory. I managed to let out a scream, then fell backward onto the bed, fainting instantly, losing all sense of time and place. When I woke up later, I smelled a strong scent of pain balm, guessing my mother had performed wind scraping on me again. Seeing me stirring in bed, everyone rushed over, asking what I had seen that made me scream and faint. I recounted everything, including seeing the woman standing by Uncle Heen's coffin 2 years ago, and even how she seemed to have knocked over Uncle Heen's altar picture that night. After telling the story, I cried like a baby, even though I was already 14 that year. I was truly scared. Her image haunted me. It's been 7 years, and I still can't forget that day because of what I saw. I felt as if she was a living woman, not a ghost, my friends. As dawn broke, Sophia rushed downstairs to check on the baby. But when she opened the door, she saw him still sleeping soundly under the mosquito net, with no signs of the previous night's thrashing or crying. Aunt Lily, worried about Jade's call last night, immediately took her motorbike and sped to Aunt Grace's house to see if the 2 girls were still there. I excitedly followed my mother into the kitchen, waiting for breakfast. Today, the air felt wonderfully fresh and pleasant, completely different from last night. If not for those eerie things, I would love to live here because it's far from the city, far from the roads. The rural atmosphere is so peaceful, it makes one feel relaxed. As I was frowning and eating a bowl of instant noodles, I saw Aunt Lily slowly walking in from the gate. I looked around, but I couldn't find her motorbike anywhere. Her face looked distraught, like someone who had lost their soul. I greeted her, but she didn't react, so I went back to eating. After Aunt Lily had gone into the kitchen for a while, she suddenly screamed loudly, "Jade, where did Jade go, Aunt Grace? Sister?" Then she cried. I ran down to see what was wrong, and Aunt Lily recounted that she had gone to Aunt Grace's house this morning to check on the 2 little girls, and Aunt Grace had said that Aunt Lily had come to pick them up last night, so why was she asking again? I was startled and immediately dropped my chopsticks. Last night, my mother and I didn't get home until late, so who would have been free to go pick them up? Knowing that something bad had happened, Grandma called everyone to go search. Alex and I immediately thought of the worst-case scenario, that she had met with an accident at the sandbank. In this season, we feared she might have gone there, slipped, and fallen into the river. But asking the surrounding houses, they all said no child had been playing out there. Breathing a sigh of relief, the two of us returned home to search around our own area. At this point, Aunt Grace and her husband also came over to help with the search. After a while, they seemed discouraged, so everyone sat on the porch to wait and see, still thinking she had just gone off to play somewhere. Suddenly, Sophia, standing at the edge of the pond next to the bathroom, shouted loudly. Everyone ran out to see her holding a pink plastic slipper. As if recognizing it as her daughter's slipper, Aunt Lily let out a wail. Alex and Aunt Grace's husband looked at each other for a moment, then jumped into the pond to search. But strangely, they searched all around the pond and even swam to the middle, but found nothing. My mother was about to suggest renting a pump to drain all the water to search, when Grandaunt Catherine told Sophia to go inside and get a dull sickle and an old shirt of Jade's. No one knew what Grandaunt Catherine intended to do. Everyone just watched. I saw Grandaunt Catherine tie the shirt to the handle of the sickle, then got into a small boat and went to the middle of the pond. After stirring the water for a while, suddenly, a bundle floated up in the middle of the pond. Looking closely, everyone gasped in horror. It was Jade's body. She was lying face down in the water. Her stomach was distended, likely full of water. When they brought her ashore, her eyes were wide open, as if she had seen something horrifying. Alex tried to close them in various ways, but they wouldn't shut. Aunt Lily cried out loudly, "My poor child, our family is already small and now another one has left me." Seeing her cry, everyone's eyes welled up with tears. Uncle Heen had married late and only had 2 daughters. Jade was only 7 years old this year, and Luna, her younger sister, was born 2 years after her. The 2 sisters were very well behaved, but I never expected this to happen today. And the gate was closed last night, so how did she get in, or had she been in the house since the evening without anyone knowing? Everyone began to prepare the coffin and everything else for the funeral. Since she was so young, they would take her to the field that afternoon. In the countryside, there's a belief that if a child dies, they must be buried on the same day. They cannot be kept at home. At 2 p.m., everyone began to take the little girl's coffin to the field. Fortunately, the coffin was not heavy at all, unlike the previous time. I was thinking, does this little girl not have any attachment to home, that she's willing to go so easily? Just as I finished thinking, thud, the 2 people carrying the coffin suddenly knelt to the ground. They cried out that as they were moving it to the car, the coffin suddenly became too heavy to lift. Seeing this, Aunt Lily thought her daughter was reluctant to leave, so she hurried to the altar, lit incense, and prayed. But even after praying, the coffin was still heavy. It seemed this time she had died too tragically and didn't want to leave. At this point, Grandma silently went to get the same sickle she had used to retrieve the body. She tapped the side of the coffin 3 times and then told the 2 men to try lifting it. The coffin became light again, unbelievably so. I stood there wide-eyed, watching. Indeed, there are many strange things in folklore that science cannot explain. I also followed everyone to take her to the field. Upon arrival, I saw a small grave dug right next to Uncle Heen's grave from before. Perhaps everyone wanted to keep the father and daughter close, so they did it this way. Before refilling the earth, Grandma threw the sickle and Jade's old shirt down into the grave and whispered something. Even now, I still wonder how Grandma could know so many wonderful and bizarre things. After the coffin was buried, everyone slowly made their way back home. That afternoon, my mother told Alex to go to Hoa Bin to pick up Master Leo immediately, because if this situation continued, it would not be good. It was almost 6 p.m., and Alex still hadn't returned, making everyone more anxious. Aunt Lily, probably exhausted, had fallen asleep on the bed. Luna, seeing her mother like that, also lay still, her face looking very gloomy and pitiful. Today was her sister's funeral, but I didn't see her cry, but looking into her eyes, I felt a deep sadness. She didn't answer anyone who asked her anything. It was truly tragic to see family members leaving one by one. I wondered if Aunt Lily would be able to overcome this shock. As I was lost in thought, I heard the sound of a motorbike outside the gate. Guessing Alex had returned, everyone rushed out. And it was true. This time, Master Leo had come along. As soon as he stepped through the gate, I saw him grimace, just like when my mother and I first visited. Today, he wore a black áo dye, a traditional Vietnamese tunic, and a turban on his head, carrying a suitcase. Perhaps it contained all his ghost exorcising tools. He looked very authoritative. As soon as he sat down at the table, he immediately said, "There are 2 black dogs standing at your gate, brother and sister. This way, the house spirits won't dare to come back." My whole family was surprised. We didn't have any dogs, so where were these 2 black dogs? But then we suddenly remembered, it must be Lou and 2. No wonder my grandma said a few days ago that Grandfather John didn't dare to return home because a ghost was guarding the gate. Could it be these 2 dogs? After speaking, the master went outside, looked around, and went to the back of the house. Then he came back inside, sat down, and continued, "That brother Alex told me everything. Your house is haunted by a malevolent spirit. I warned you, but you didn't pay attention, and now the little girl suffers." He sighed and drank the entire cup of tea. He instructed everyone to sleep upstairs tonight, and he would sleep downstairs with the baby. He warned that if they heard anything strange, they were not to open the door, even if they heard him calling. Today, I didn't see him smiling like usual. His face was very solemn. The whole family just acknowledged his words and followed everything he said. I felt that something very strange was happening today, but I didn't know what it was. I felt restless and uneasy. My grandma still stayed. She said she wouldn't feel at ease if she went home now. I felt pity for her. She had been thinking about these matters for days now. She was also old, and everyone feared she might fall ill. In the middle of the night, I woke up with a start to the sound of heavy footsteps outside in the courtyard. It felt like a large crowd, and then I heard people talking to each other, but very softly. I couldn't tell if it was human voices or the sound of wind whistling. Suddenly, I remembered that there was no wind this season. Terrified, I huddled close to Alex. He was sleeping too soundly. I glanced up at the bed and saw everyone else also asleep, oblivious. Didn't they hear anything, or how could they still sleep? I lay still, trying to force myself back to sleep. I tried to reassure myself that Master Leo was here today, so surely nothing would happen. I imitated Grandma, softly mumbling, "Namo Amitabha Buddha." As I lay there, suddenly there was a knock at the door and a voice called out, "Open the door for me, dear host." I heard every word clearly because Alex and I were sleeping on mats on the floor right next to the door, and I also clearly recognized Master Leo's voice. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. I gently pinched Alex's back, but he didn't react at all. Outside, the knocking and calling continued steadily. I couldn't imagine what was out there. It was too terrifying for me. Never had I needed someone by my side as much as I did then. I lay still, ignoring it, still mumbling the chants. After a while, there was no sound anymore, only the croaking of frogs. When I woke up in the morning, I felt completely drained. I hadn't been able to sleep well for several nights. Everyone else was already up, preparing breakfast for the master. I looked at him surreptitiously, full of questions, wanting to ask but not daring to. But I guessed it wasn't him last night, because there was no reason for him to come up to the house in the middle of the night like that. And if he had called, he would have asked this morning why we didn't open the door for him. The morning air was fresh, but for some reason, I suddenly felt very suffocated. I looked out into the yard and shuddered. I didn't know what horrifying things had happened here last night. I stumbled to the back of the house to brush my teeth, then came back in for breakfast. Grandma was busily carrying a load of offerings. My mother and Sophia were slaughtering chickens and preparing sticky rice. Everyone seemed very busy today, as if there was a feast. Aunt Lily and Luna were still sleeping. No one wanted to wake the 2 of them. 2 mats were spread in the middle of the yard to display the offerings and for the master to sit and perform the ritual. A moment later, I saw my mother bring out a plate of sticky rice and a steaming chicken. The master told them to wake Aunt Lily for the ceremony, as she was now the lady of the house. Aunt Lily looked very tired, her eyes still red and swollen. The master handed her a stick of incense, telling her to bow to the 4 directions and then place it in the incense bowl. Everyone knelt around, clasping their hands and praying continuously. The master's body trembled, and he mumbled some words I didn't understand, but it didn't seem to be going smoothly, as I saw sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. After praying like that for a while, the master turned and shook his head, saying the spirit refused to accept the offerings. He sat down and continued to pray, but this time, after only a few words, Sophia suddenly convulsed, then burst into maniacal laughter and lunged at the offering table, sweeping everything onto the yard. My whole family's faces went pale. Suddenly, Master Leo shouted loudly, "You, sit still." Sophia seemed not to hear anything, still angrily sweeping everything away. Suddenly, she turned and lunged towards my family standing nearby. Looking at her then, I wanted to run, but I couldn't move my legs. Everyone started to panic, then Sophia suddenly collapsed, groaning. I felt as if she was being held down by someone and couldn't move. At this point, Master Leo suddenly spoke. "I told you to sit still, but you wouldn't listen. Do you think no one here can deal with you?" It seemed the rumors about sorcerers keeping yin soldiers were true, my friends. I saw Sophia lying on the ground, struggling but unable to move. Her body was rigid, as if something was pressing down on her. I thought it was the yin soldiers and ghost generals people used to talk about. Her mouth was still growling, her eyes rolling wildly. Master Leo approached her and asked, "Who are you? Where do you come from, and why are you haunting this house?" Then she started screaming, but I guarantee it wasn't her voice, but a woman's voice that sounded very unfamiliar. "Let me go, you son of a bitch." She kept struggling, kicking wildly, and her mouth kept screaming to be let go. I noticed Master Leo muttering something, then Sophia suddenly shrieked in pain, her face distorted, and her mouth began to plead with Master Leo. The master stepped closer and slowly said, "Tell me where you came from. Why are you causing chaos in someone's house? I'm not playing games with you." She then began to recount her story and Grandfather John's. That night, after great-grandfather Daniel took Grandfather John home, she packed all her belongings and went back to her hometown. At home, she cried a lot because she still loved him, but as much as she loved him, she hated him even more. After a few months at home, her belly began to grow. At that time, she still didn't dare to tell her family that she was pregnant because the feudal elders back then were very old-fashioned. They considered a daughter getting pregnant out of wedlock to be a disgrace to her family and relatives, and it wasn't just in the past. I think it still exists today. Modesty and a daughter's honor are still paramount. She, however, couldn't bear to abandon the pregnancy, so she quietly kept it a secret, hiding it away. But the truth will out eventually, and what was bound to happen happened. Her father found out, and he beat and cursed his daughter terribly. He threw her out of the house with her 4-month pregnant belly. No matter how much her mother cried and begged, it was to no avail. She had to watch her daughter be driven out onto the street. And that very night, she thought she had jumped into the river to commit suicide. She then followed Grandfather John's friend all the way up here. After she finished, I saw her eyes were wet. She must have been crying. Suddenly, my own eyes teared up. The fate of women in the past was truly tragic and cheap. It seemed men only saw them as something to keep house, cook, and do laundry. They never truly saw women as human beings, and never had I hated Grandfather John so much. Just because of his own cowardice, he caused so many people to suffer. If he had been determined to protect her that day, who knows, they might have become husband and wife. I also hated her father, who, for a bit of false pride, let his daughter die in shame. I despise such people. Turning around, I saw everyone sitting there, their eyes also red. Perhaps now no one feared her anymore, but they still resented her for letting the hatred of the previous generations spill over to the children and grandchildren. Little Jade had done nothing wrong. Master Leo's face remained cold as he continued, "Don't use tears to gain pity. What sin did that little girl commit that you drowned her? Tell me the truth, what have you done to disrupt this house?" Now she let out a piercing laugh, speaking in a high-pitched, unpleasant voice. "Before, I wanted to take that dog's son with me, but his father's spirit was too strong. I couldn't get close to him. His mother died and then possessed the dog, trying to bite me, so I killed it right away." Everyone shuddered. So that day, too was possessed by Uncle Heen, who came back to visit his wife and children. And everyone, not knowing, chased it away. And did I hear the dogs barking that day because Tu and Lu were fighting? I heard Tu's whimpering, wanting to come into the house, but I was too scared to go out. She then shouted loudly, "Let me go, you son of a bitch. You're about to die yourself, yet you're still helping living people. Let me go." Master Leo quietly reached into his suitcase, pulled out 2 large yellow papers with a huge Bagua symbol printed in the middle, spread them on the mat, and then mumbled some incantations before shouting, "You cause trouble here, and the saints and deities know nothing? That's quite something. But since you've harmed people, today I must take you to meet the judge of the underworld. Whether I live or die is my business, you don't need to concern yourself." After saying that, I saw him chant something, wave his hands as if giving an order, then quickly snatch the paper he had just pulled out, fold it, and put it back in the suitcase. Sophia only had time to let out a shriek before fainting. He instructed Alex to go downstairs, pick up the baby for him to cut the phantom bond, cat lawn. As soon as the baby saw him, it cried loudly again. Yet it had slept with him all last night, and I hadn't heard it cry. After placing it on the mat, he took a yellow paper I thought it was a talisman, stuck it directly on the baby's foot, and then chanted more strange words. After he stuck it, the baby immediately stopped crying, its eyes wide open, staring at the sky again. He told Alex to just raise it for a few more months, and it would leave on its own. Now there was nothing to fear. He turned to everyone and said, "Don't worry, everyone. This spirit has strong resentment, so I will take it to meet the judge of the underworld for judgment. Now, everyone take all those offerings and burn them. I've also sent people to catch the 2 dogs at the gate, so now your ancestors can return home." After a moment of hesitation, he continued, "But I find your grandfather to be quite wicked." He sighed, then packed all his belongings into a suitcase. Everyone invited him to stay for lunch, but he adamantly refused. He insisted that Alex drive him home. Seeing this, my family didn't dare to keep him. He looked very tired, as he was old and still doing things that went against the will of the spirits. I heard that those who work as fortune tellers, exorcists, and ghost catchers will be bothered by spirits after they die. I wonder if it's true. That evening, I noticed that everyone was no longer as scared as they had been in the previous days. Grandma had also returned home. Alex still looked at the baby with wary eyes. But finally, that night, I had a full night's sleep. After staying for a few more days, my mother and I went home because my father kept calling, anxious. After being home for a while, news came from the countryside that the phantom child passed away a few months later. But then Sophia became pregnant again immediately. Her belly was pointed again, so everyone thought it would be a boy. When she gave birth, everyone breathed a sigh of relief because there was no blue birthmark on its foot. So Master Leo had successfully cut the phantom bond. I never expected him to be so skilled. I haven't heard anyone talk about him for a long time. I'm sure he's very old now. This past Tet holiday, I went to visit and saw Alex's son, Victor. He's grown so big now, running and playing like a little devil. I believe that in life, what you sow, you shall reap. Sooner or later, you have to pay for the karma you create. If you don't pay, your children and grandchildren will have to suffer it. There's no escaping it, my friends. Have faith. If your heart is still beating calmly after this story, please subscribe to join AM Enhan Audio in exploring many other mysteries. A shiver down your spine every night.